Good morning, Frank here from Same Day Restoration. So welcome back to our Mitigation 101. Today's topic is going to be mold. So we know there's a lot of information out there regarding mold, how to deal with it, who to call. So we thought we'd bring in the experts to demystify and debunk some of the ideas that most of us may have about it. So we brought in Bruce and Matt from Rarefied Air to help us on this topic today. Hi, Frank here from Same Day Restoration. So we're fortunate enough to have Matt Czar here today, one of the owners at Rarefied Air. And Matt is going to help us with some questions that we fielded off of our website and some of the most commonly asked questions that we have regarding mold. So Matt?
Yes, sir. I've got about 17 years experience in the field, and I know we get a lot of questions and people being uncertain about these things, so we just wanted to help you guys get some answers and some clarification for people out there to understand why to do testing, when to do testing, and how to go about it.
Perfect. All right, so let's get into it. I've got a few questions, like I said, that we took off of our website. So one question would be, if there's no visible mold, do you test the air to see if there's mold present in the home?
Yeah, I would still say you should do the testing, because not all the time are you going to see the mold. Sometimes it'll be hidden behind baseboards, or it's starting in a wall cavity and it's growing on the backside of the drywall or underneath vinyl flooring and you can't see it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a problem. So if you don't see it, but you know that there's an issue going on, or you have a tenant that is having allergic reactions, I would still recommend to do the testing to either one, find out what's going on, or maybe to eliminate that as the potential reason as why there is a problem.
Okay, great, that makes sense. Good answer, Matt, thank you. So we also have on there, it says, when you test for mold, is the mold the same, or are there some molds that are hazardous as compared to others?
There's always going to be some that are going to cause more allergic reactions to people. Aspergillus penicillium is going to be one of the more popular ones. It's more relevant in hospitals because it could cause staph infections, but that's also going to get reactions like hay fever with the itchy eyes, itchy skin, runny nose, things like that. But it also depends on the person. Some people are going to be more susceptible to certain types of mold. Sometimes we've even had people take these mold reports and take it to their physician, and they'll have allergy tests done, and they may be more sensitive to one than the other. So yes, on a normal scale, Stachybotrys is the toxic mold. That's kind of the hot topic, hot button one, Aspergillus. But I've had customers that are allergic to cladosporium, which is something that's always around, but if it's in their home in higher numbers, that may affect them as compared to others. It may not affect them. So the short answer is yes, that some are going to affect people more than other types.
That's good to know. So next question for you, Matt. Is it true that if you already see exposed mold, that you really don't need to test, and that you can call same day to come out and give you an estimate?
I would still recommend that you do testing, and the reason being is what levels are we dealing with and what types are we dealing with. So a snapshot in time when we go out there and sample, although you may see mold growth under the cabinet, okay, we gotta remove the cabinet, we're gonna cut the drywall, that's a given. But one, what kind of airborne levels are we dealing with? If these levels are extremely high, you're gonna wanna go in there, contain it right away, put air filters in, put air filters outside. But also if the levels are really high, then we might be moving into duct cleaning that would be needed, because this system has been pulling these mold spores through, so you're gonna wanna clean the ducts. If you're in a bedroom, maybe it's level so high that you're gonna wanna remove carpet or launder some clothes in a closet because the levels are so high. So even though you know that it's there and you're going to do removal, I still think that it's relevant to do the air sampling, and it could give the client a more clear picture on what needs to happen from there on out.
Makes sense. It can give them peace of mind also, knowing that the environment they're in has been tested, and they can have some peace of mind with their family for sure.
Yeah, and liability reasons. You always want to maybe set some baselines, and if there was already pre-existing, it'll show how it was before you went in and then how your levels are after, because once a remediation is done, you definitely want to test and make sure that it's been cleaned properly and that the air is ready for reoccupancy.
Okay, learning a lot today. Next question we had is it important to hire a qualified, licensed, and trained mold remediation company? Or could you hire maybe just a handyman to come in and take care of the problem?
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people do is just handing it off to a handyman. Anybody can go and cut a piece of drywall out, but there's so many control methods that should be in place while you guys are doing this. Setting a containment, sealing off vents, taking things out of the area like towels and children's toys. Because once you disturb the mold, it's going to be in the air in vast quantities. I've seen spore counts in the hundreds of thousands while work is going on. So if you're just sending a guy in there to cut it out without air filtering devices, cleaning it properly, making sure the framing is dry before you build back, it's not doing you much good. And it's also opening up the owners to liability, because now you could have potentially exposed tenants to it, or if it's your own home, you could be exposing your children to high levels. So I think it's always the best practice to hire a licensed mold remediation contractor with trained guys that are gonna know how to remediate it properly.
Makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about how the air clearance process works for our viewers today? I know that's always a question that comes up when we're doing mold work. Can you give us some details on how that goes?
Sure, so we're gonna collect a couple air samples. We always collect an air sample outside to set a baseline. And then we're gonna go into the work area containment. We're gonna do a visual assessment to make sure there's no visible mold growth still present. And then we're going to do moisture measurements to make sure all the materials have been properly dried. If we were to go in there and we found visible mold growth or wet materials, we're typically not gonna test, because then you're burning money at that point. You might as well make sure that all your ducks are in a row first, and then we'll run the air sample. When we run the air sample, that's gonna give you an indication of whether there's still the mold floating around, the mold spores. So visual assessment, test the moisture, run the air samples. After we run the air samples, we take it to an accredited laboratory. They'll do a direct analysis and give us a report with numbers put to the mold spore types present. Your levels inside should be less than the outdoors. And we're also gonna look at certain indicated mold spore types like aspergillus and cotomium, stachybotrys, ones that are associated with mold growth on construction products.
So I would say that there's questions on reading the mold report. If there was one thing that a viewer could glean from this today, what categories would someone need to really focus on to make sure that things are consistent with the air being clear?
Sure, aspergillus penicillium, eulocladium alternaria, cotomium, and stachybotrys, I think are gonna be your main red flags. You also wanna just look at overall numbers. If you're in a controlled work area containment with air filtering devices, those numbers should be lower than outdoors. So if we go inside and just the total mold spore count is higher, that's probably not a good indication that it's been cleaned properly. But also you wanna look at those mold spore types, and the levels inside should be lower than the outdoor reading.
Okay, there you go. Let's see, what would you recommend somebody who encounters mold for the first time? If it's visible mold, does that mean that they need to, do a full-blown, remediation, or what steps would you recommend for someone who sees mold in their home for the first time in an area that's been wet maybe for a few days? I mean, or how long does it take for mold to actually become a problem?
Typically, once water intrusion occurs, it's gonna be about 48 hours before the mold growth is going to begin. If a homeowner were to see it, or an HOA, and a property manager were to see it, I think the first step would probably call somebody like same day restoration to come out, because sometimes it may be really minor. It may just be splashing on top of a sink countertop, and we have some minor growth to where you guys can do minor removal and kind of nip it in the bud there. But if it's anything more to where it's been ongoing, or there's a lot of visible growth, it is good to call somebody like us, because we can go in there, test it, and then we can give you guys a scope of work. What's good about the scope of work is we're third party, we're not tied into it, we don't do restoration. So we're gonna give them the proper steps to remediate it, no more, no less. So that prevents guys coming in, oh, I have to entirely gut your bathroom and I gotta remove flooring and all these things that may not be necessary. So we can put that scope of work and then you guys go and follow that scope of work, and that puts the liability more on our shoulders because you say, hey, these are the guys that put the recommendations together, so we're gonna follow this scope of work generally and remediate the problem.
That's really good to know. I know that there has been some concern in the past that some of the jobs can tend to get overscoped, but if it's coming from the recommendation from the lab, well, then we're simply following the protocol that's been set by our environmental testing company. So I think there's some great information that Matt shared with us today. Are there anything you'd like to say to the viewers or anybody before we're done today?
Just to always use professionals. I just think that sometimes going in to remediate it yourselves, you don't really know all the steps or the things that should happen. Some people feel they can just wipe mold down and it's done with, or if we paint over it, it's, you know, oh, we painted, we don't see it anymore, it's good.
Yeah.
It's just best to get professionals in there, one for the health of the tenants, liability purposes for the HOA, and also just for the health of your building, because if there's a long ongoing water intrusion problem, mold may be only one problem. You may have wood rot issues on framing and other issues going on, hidden leaks that you don't know about. So I really recommend hiring professionals to do the work for everybody's sake. It would be best.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thanks again to Matt for joining us today, and we appreciate your time. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
The team here at Same Day Restoration would like to thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to make sure you can stay up to date with our current weekly content. Thank you.